So, hey everybody, I think we're live. So, welcome to our weekly meditations. So, I thought the theme we could look at today is moving from fear into trust. So, this is really the story of our lives, isn't it? So much of our life is based on insufficient um, clarity about who we are. We experience ourselves as unworthy, insignificant, um, limited. And thereby, we go around trying to control our realities, which keeps us in a state of separation, which then generates fear. And the story of our lives, because it's such a deep conditioning, are all about attracting circumstances, relationships, events that engender that belief system around separation, around limitedness, unworthiness, unattractiveness, victimhood. And it's become normal. We don't question it. We don't question that suffering is the basis of reality and that even the path towards enlightenment has to be through suffering. It's just so deep in our collective psyche. So, just looking at the chat here. So, hey, everybody. So, yeah, it's lovely to see the community. It's like all of you that I notice here on chat have been here many, many times. So, it's good to know that we are, building a container that continues to go deeper, continues to go into a clear understanding of who we are and what our potential is. Because once we break through the conditioning of fear, we can actually activate our true potential as divine human beings. And that comes from this place of trust. We trust who we are as infinite consciousness. We know who we are as infinite consciousness. And trust is a gateway. It's what allows that frequency to bring into our lives whatever circumstances, whatever people are necessary to keep us in the flow, to keep our hearts open, keep our spirits powerful, alive, passionate, joyful. We have intentionally restricted the life force running through our chakras, running through our nadis, the meridians, and extending up into the upper world, into the lower world. Simply because if we truly believe and understand and feel and experience and become this living force of light, it would be too much for the nervous system at first. So it's an adjustment, it's a process. And so this journey from fear into trust has to do with awakening our nervous system to be able to hold more of this divine light. What we fear is not darkness. What we fear is greater light. Greater light can look like darkness because it brings forth, it brings to the surface what has been hidden. Because we cannot carry darkness into light, we have to transmute darkness into light. And so as the light shines in, it brings to the surface everything that's dark. And because we are resisting it, because we've been trained and conditioned to deny our own shadows, to feel uncomfortable with that expression, whether it's through our emotions or whether it's through our actions or belief systems, we protect ourselves from the pain of light. Khalil Gibran says it so beautifully, and I wish I remembered the actual words, but he says, the pain we carry in our hearts is simply a, a gateway to more light. The sorrows are a prelude to breaking our hearts open so we can experience love and infinite bliss. But it's because we have closed our hearts to the mystery that we are stuck in the conditioning of our current beliefs and realities. So everything, just take a moment and look at what our fears are about. And invariably, they have to do with the past. Um, being betrayed by somebody, having been hurt by something, having had a traumatic experience or accident where our biological systems get overloaded, or it has to do with our belief systems, having seen a lot of suffering and evil in the world, and then creating walls of resistance around that perspective. Once we begin to shift those perspectives and recognize that there's nothing outside of divine light, there's nothing outside of divine love, then things fall into place in a different way. Often it means the entire foundation has to collapse. And this is what's happening now. So, what we see in the world around us is the foundations collapsing. The foundations of our inadequacy, the foundations of our limited understandings about reality, the foundations of our fear. And as they collapse, it's like, we're being forced to wake up, to grow, to go through an alchemical experience. And many of us will not make it because we are simply too disconnected. And that's the tragedy. And then we apply that tragedy to ourselves and pretend that there's no way out. And this is what it takes, unfortunately, to truly become mature. If we were not conditioned to resist in the first place, our job would be much easier. But because we've been taught to fight against the wrong, which means often to fight against the light. I know it sounds like a paradox, and I'm not saying that we don't fight against third dimensional expressions of wrong. I'm talking about the attitudes that we carry within ourselves that attract to ourselves this cycle of victimization and perpetration. We can resist untruth, ignorance, and fear by holding our hearts open to greater light and love and beauty. It just comes from a different place, even though the actions sometimes look very similar. One leads to empowerment, one leads to fear and despair. So Marianne says, I feel like I know who I am, but I can't seem to access my abilities. Is it ever the case that we block our abilities on purpose, even if we want them to activate? Yeah, it's a good question. It's a good question, especially if we have equated enlightenment with abilities, which goes for many of us, including myself. And there was a time in my life when I expected that enlightenment would look like all the channels were open, I had full clairvoyance and clairaudience and telepathic communication with every aspect of the universe, that I could do no harm, no to anyone, or I could experience no harm from anyone. But that's not the way it is, simply because we are still in the training school of life, where we are experiencing third dimensional reality as real. If we can master third dimensional reality, which means basically that we're not attached to an outcome, that allows us to move freely into fifth dimensional opportunities and abilities. There's always what they call doorkeepers. So before we're truly ready for our abilities to be potentized, there will be a testing. Are we in a state of um, non-resistance? Are we in a state of total um, surrender to the flow of the universe, which is what is reality? And this takes a little bit of refinement. Once we do so, once we break through, then our abilities begin to flower because it's part of our subtle um, senses. Our senses don't stop with physical vision, hearing, touch, taste, and feeling. They extend out into multidimensional realizations. And it becomes very natural at a certain stage. If you're forcing it, then you're still operating from resistance. You're still operating from lack, unworthiness, and fear. So it's kind of a paradox. Um, we don't need to have all of our senses wide open in order to experience our divinity. We don't need to be fully clairvoyant and telepathic before we can experience ourselves um, in our truth. That's where trust comes in, and that trust is based on being in the present moment, being fully aware of whatever is. So if you're not stuck in the past, patterns in the past, conditionings from the past, fears and traumas that have accumulated from the past, or if you're not in the future, in expectations, ideas, hopes and fears, then we can remain present with what is, which is what it means to be in the flow, which is the experience of divinity. So we have to demystify what these abilities are about. When the time comes, they flower. If it's necessary, they awaken. It may be that, with current realities being what they are, if it becomes impossible to travel anymore without their vaccine passports, then we learn to teleport ourselves. But it happens spontaneously and naturally. It's not like you have to force anything before it's time. The need to force reality before it's mature is the source of much of our suffering. So, yeah, just it's a tough one because we want to grow as quick as we can. We want to break out of our misery, not just personally, but collective human misery. We want to move into a state of evolution where where we're not a cancer on this planet, where we truly become part of Gaia. But we get impatient. I know I get impatient. And that impatience means that we are losing our perspective. And so to trust means to find that perspective, to see the big picture, to see that there's right, perfect timing to everything, and surrender to that. And then everything that's needed comes into our life. It starts to open and flower naturally and beautifully. One thing it meant for me is to let go of the idea that I had to take on the whole world's suffering on my shoulders. And I developed immense pain, literal pain in my shoulders, my neck, because of that belief. And I'm sure this is something that many of us have gone through. The fear that it's not my planet, It's not what I signed up for, and therefore I'm going to force something to change. So trust also requires that we see the bigger picture of why we're here. We're here to hold a frequency. We're here to remember. And then that has an impact invisibly on the whole collective, and things begin to shift. We're simply raising our consciousness and that scale of consciousness where we're no longer locked into despair, no longer stuck in reaction to what's going on around us. Then we can truly respond from a place of knowing and finding a place within the universe, our unique place, which may be different from anybody else's place. And then together and collectively, we participate in the creation of a new earth. So already says, Kia, do you know Jennifer Healy? I don't think so. Maybe I do. I'm not always familiar with people's last names. So it may be that I know Jennifer Healy, but don't know that I know her. Sorry, if I have more information, maybe I could say. Hey, Maria. So Paula says the same here, and yes, I suffer from chronic pain, most likely because of stress and taking the problems of the world on my shoulders. Oh, okay, RD. No, the Healy device is different. This is it's not aerial yoga. It's actually a healing device working with specific frequencies that you using electrodes to either electrodes that you directly place on your body, or it works through subspace. But going back to this thing about taking on the problems of the world and chronic pain, this is it's a real concern, and there's so many different aspects to this. One is just living in a world where there's so much pollution, so much out of balance. So we eat foods that don't have life force, that have been denatured, that are filled with glycophages and GMOs, and our waters are polluted. Our bodies need to be flushed, but get toxic. The mitochondria get, they cannot exchange energies as they used to. So all these things, it helps to somehow tone down the functionality of our DNA. The telomeres on the tips of the DNA get frazzled. They start, and aging begins to happen. And this causes cellular pain. Our belief systems, emotional states, are in a complex interaction with all of this. So I'm not saying that if your heart, mind, and body are in perfect alignment to your true self, that you'll never be sick. There are many factors, and it's not as simple as that. But if we can begin to become more conscious, we can work with herbs, and we can work with nature's healing gifts to ease the pain. On an emotional level, many people are experiencing panic attacks. What is that about? Sometimes these panic attacks just come with so much force and so much venom. It's hard to resist. And the more you try and understand, the more hopeless it becomes, because it's not about understanding. It's not even about specific trauma or events in the past. It's just something that's there. Um, I don't know if it's hormonal, if it has to do with a nervous system being somehow attacked by frequency waves, um, or if it's a mind control that is outside of our awareness. A lot of it is mystery to me, but the fact that there are panic attacks, we do experience these, and they take us down into a spiral of fear and despair and feeling lost and disconnected. All right, so as that starts happening, do what you need to do on the outer levels. Find the right herbs, the essential oils. Work with the elements of water and earth, wind. Um, do meditation, pranayama practices. Um, use your body to move, to flow, to connect with nature. All these things make a difference. But then also become aware that it's not real in itself. So in the midst of that, if you can experience the stillness, if you can experience the bliss, because that comes from presence, and the presence never fades no matter what. The presence of God, that stillness, the self, the primordial essence, is there in the midst of everything. Look for that. And that then helps to break through. Then our breath can match that. Our bodies can reverse the clamping of life force. We let go of emotional trauma and physical panic and fear. We start to release any kind of fixed beliefs about anything and learn to simply flow, not expecting that life is going to be constantly and totally blissful, because bliss isn't about circumstances outside of us. It's coming into presence with who we are in the midst of all circumstances in life. This is what takes us from third dimensional duality into higher dimensional presence. So it's a journey. So we've talked about this before, but in this instance, we're talking about the movement into deeper and deeper layers of trust, coming out of pain, coming out of suffering, coming out of duality. And as we are learning to do this individually, we're also making an impact collectively. This is our contribution to the wholeness. Like R.D. says, yeah, some of that may be the collective energy we're feeling. Especially these days, we're dealing with so much stress and panic. I don't like to call it a pandemic, it's a panic-demic. Without the panic generated by the media and by blowing things out of proportion, there wouldn't be nothing. So, yeah, a lot of fear came up for me this week. Heavy chemtrail spraying here today. I look up and think, why worry? So the chemtrails, what are they? The barium, they're aluminum, iridium, certain chemical compounds that stops the exchange of energy in the cells. So normally, the way if I remember my high school biology, there's an exchange of ions from the inside of the cell and the outside of the cell. And if the exchange happens fluidly, there's health. We don't age. We experience the biological um, aspects of wellness. But what these chemtrails do, what these heavy metals do, they prevent this exchange and then they accumulate within the cells and create a toxicity that cannot be easily eliminated from the system, especially if our waters are also polluted with these fluorides and chlorines and all these things. If our foods are radiated with GMOs and so on, if our belief systems are toxic, and if there's emotional stress, it forces us into this very toxic soup where we where our emotions become out of control. It leads to more of a propensity for panic attacks and for mental breakdowns and physical challenges. So perspective, is so important, and remembrance of who we are, not based on circumstances, but based on recognition of our inner truth. So Imogen says many teachers have helped. Vipassana, Mother Meera, Ramana, Reiki, um, all of this which shows you, guides you to start looking inside and to trust. So trust is a journey. And we are sensitive creatures, very, very sensitive, more sensitive than we realize. And that's why we pick up so much from the world around us, from other people, from our environment, without even knowing it. And that makes a difference if you're in the middle of a city where, there's all this panic around COVID or vaccines or whatever. You're subtly picking up all these vibrations and it's affecting you. When people talk about spike proteins, they're not just talking about, fragments of um, mRNA or DNA. It's also um, a vibrational frequency that resonates out and gets picked up. We are very sensitive barometers. So frequency girl, I saw a small white orb fly behind Kiara. I wondered about these orbs. Are they? In the old days, people talked about pixies and fairies, elemental beings which are connected with forces of life and which are responsive to light flows. And I think the orbs are similar. You know, we, apart from a few cultures, much of the world has become a little bit desensitized to these old realizations and abilities. So orbs are somehow easier to deal with. They could be interdimensional beings as well. So they could be elemental, they could be interdimensional. The Merkaba in each case is very similar. And I've actually taken photos of people who are doing healing work with each other and seen orbs around them which have sacred geometry very clearly indicated inside them. So, it's not just specks of dust in the camera lens. So Francesca says, time to detox. Spirulina, chlorella, coriander. I would also say turmeric, black pepper, different kinds of teas, bentonite, clays, to flush out heavy metals where they've been locked into the intestinal coils. Anything that, liver flushes, kidney cleanses, black walnut tea is good for the kidneys. Apples apple juices followed by uh, lemon juice and the olive oil mix um, can help with flushing out gallstones and liver stones. There's a lot of this on the internet that people can look up for themselves. Activated charcoal, yes. Um, Last week we had Erica Romelli on our Age of Pandora, and she was speaking a lot about all these different possibilities, and activated charcoal was one of them. So just having this, once or twice every day, um, as part of the regimen. Golden milk, that's another good formula. So it's um, turmeric with a little bit of black pepper, which enhances the effects of the turmeric, along with ginger powder, and all mixed together with honey and milk. It could be almond milk if you like, or some kind of grain, coconut milk, if you're not into dairy. So just having that every day, and it's delicious and it's healthy. Um, Doing smoothies, with all kinds of green stuff included in it, nuts, fruits and berries. Blueberries are really good with antioxidants. So there's a lot of natural remedies. It doesn't have to be in a vitamin tablet. Zinc is really important in these times. Vitamin D, whether it comes from the sun or as a supplement. Vitamin C is extremely important. All of these vitamins and supplements and minerals also help with the balancing of our hormonal system, our endocrine system, which then works with the chakras and the meridians. So it's all interrelated. You can start anywhere. You can start with the meridians, for instance, using herbs, using acupuncture. You can start with the chakras, doing energy work, practices to open up where places which have been blocked. You can start with the Inca practices, which work with the Navis, build the tree of life. We can start with dietary considerations and cleanses and detox programs. So all of this is part of the awareness. You can start with awareness itself. Where is it that I'm holding back? Where is it that I'm stuck? Where am I carrying miasms that are not just physical but also energetic? How do my belief systems connect with the dysfunctionality that I'm experiencing in my body? So, just good questions. But because things are happening so quickly now, it becomes really important to pay attention. Wherever we start, just pay attention. If it means going out in nature and spending more time talking with a tree or a bug, do that. If it means going someplace where people can see you for who you are, where you feel comfortable with who you are, whether it's a physical circle of people or online, just like here. So we're doing the best we can, knowing that that's all we can do, because this is a challenge to be here at this time, to deal with all the inconsistencies of our spiritual and physical journeys at this time. I do trust that the times are changing, that there are times to come which will be so immensely beautiful, and this is not too far distant in the future. We are passing through this dark night. We're transitioning into something that we came to this earth to remember. And it's because we are here holding that remembrance that we are also facilitating this new earth. And there's many of us from all over the galaxies. And I was listening to Elena Deman, whom we also interviewed on Age of Pandora maybe 3 weeks ago. And in the most recent message, she says she just telepathically linked with several of the galactic races, and they've been saying that it's time that humans are coming into their own, that the forces that have been holding us hostage, some of the species that have been manipulating us and sucking the life force from us, are being dispelled. They're no longer welcome. And as this happens, the quarantine between worlds is being lifted, and we are remembering who we are as galactic humans. We're learning how to use technologies that have been hidden from the populace. Very simple, but very advanced at the same time. So technologies that can assist us in traveling instantly from place to place without the need for cumbersome vehicles. Technologies to experience our inner self, our multidimensional consciousness, to activate the Merkaba, to learn to live from prana. So these are internal technologies as well as external technologies, which are making us sovereign and self-sufficient. And this is what our divine potentials are all about. And it's entering into our DNA in a way that that sparks a generational work. So the species is changing. It's not just a few individuals with advanced abilities. As it enters into our DNA, it then opens up a path for the entire species to advance. And this is Gaia's plan. So it's not we humans who are in charge. It's Gaia who's directing all this. And it's the Cosmic Mother who's behind all this. So it's much bigger than our own likes and dislikes, our own fears and hopes. So that's part of the perspective that I like to come back to. So Ramdo says, thanks for the positivity, Kiara. I seem to have mislaid my creative flow and desire. Yeah, oh, I know. We all go through these phases. There are times when I'm very creative and the flow is just so strong and unstoppable. And there are times when it's not, when I'm just stuck in the mud somewhere. And a lot of it has to do with circumstances around me. So yeah, just having compassion for ourselves when we're not feeling in the flow, knowing that things always turn around. Yeah, Falcon, hard to sleep. Yeah, that's there's several reasons for that, I think. One is, yes, we are dealing with electrical frequencies which are affecting our nervous system. It's affecting the balance of frequency waves being generated by the brain. So if there's too much beta frequency, which can happen when there's influence from electronic devices and chemtrails and so on. Um, One is solar flares and cosmic waves entering the Earth's atmosphere. One is magnetic field collapse, which is an exponential process happening right now. Um, so all this is part of the insomnia that many of us are feeling. But there's also the other side of it, which is that many of us may not be needing as much sleep as we thought we did. We can get by on much less sleep. And as we learn to be comfortable with that, we can use that extra time for creative projects, or even just to lie awake and then just experience ourselves, do some vipassana, feel the resonance of these frequencies within every cell of your body, work with the breath. A lot of this you can just do laying down. You don't have to be sitting up to meditate if you don't feel like it. So, yeah, so all these ascension symptoms are positive in the sense that all of them are about a shift of vibrational frequency. And because so much of this is electrical, based in the nervous system, it leads to a lot of um, activation within the nervous system, some of which is unpleasant. Insomnia, kundalini rushes, which can cause, some of it is very pleasant and blissful, some of it is very painful. When the energy gets stuck somewhere, there's a sense of pins and needles, um, or pain, physical pain somewhere in the body. So this is all part of the change. And if we can surrender to this is part of what Vipassana is about. If we can surrender to it, not resist it, it changes. If you can enter into it, it changes. So for instance, if you're experiencing pain in the left shoulder and you take some time to just move your attention around through the cells of the physical body, you become aware of sensations there, not resisting anything, not getting attached to something. Sometimes it's very blissful, sometimes it's very painful. Whatever it is, you just let it be. Experience it as best you can, physically and energetically, and then move your attention back and forth, up and down. Eventually, what happens, you learn to actually enter into the pain. So you go into layers. The pain breaks down. What you notice is there's heat. Um, Along with heat, there could be areas which which carry memories. There could be painful memories. There could be lost memories. And then there's a sudden release, and then the pain lifts, or the pain moves. It had been sitting here, and somehow now it's moving somewhere else. So much of this is energetic. Much of this is about releasing hucha. From mud to sun. Love you, Kiara. Yeah, that's the lotus, isn't it? The Buddhists talk about the lotus, which is rooted in the mud and then blossoms towards the sun. And the lotus is a symbol of the crown, the 1,000-petal lotus, which isn't just the top of the head here. It actually extends out, so the lotus actually moves up through different dimensions. And so what we call the window in the Inca tradition, this gateway into the upper world, is the top of this lotus. So Falcon, thank you. Yes, that too, because the pull or change in gravity on the body was a shock at first. Yeah, so I don't know if this was referring to the magnetic fields changing, but the fact that we are here on this planet with its own specific gravitational system, its own specific environmental um, makeup, like the constitution of the different gases in different proportions, the distance from the sun, the the effects of the moon and stars and other planets around. All of this is very specific to this planet. And so it creates a very specific kind of nervous system, a specific kind of human DNA, which is unique for us here on this planet. If if we somehow travel out to Mars or Jupiter or Saturn, our experience will be very different. And it'll take some time to adjust to being on this planet. That's why we need a spacesuit at first. I'm not just talking about conventional travel, but also um, some of the travel that has been. Well, how can I say this? Um, there's the secret space program, which has been experimenting with this for decades, with um, very rapid and effective travel between worlds, between planets, between dimensions. So also being able to go into the inner Earth, into dimensions that are not close to the surface. All of this requires a certain attitude, a certain training, and a certain vibrational frequency. So people have been trained for this, and some better than others are able to experience this. So whatever you have ever watched on Star Trek, it's not all science fiction. It's simply, you know, an unveiling into the collective for what's possible. So yes, so any change in gravity on the body is a bit shocking. And any change in the magnetic fields is a bit shocking. Anytime there's a massive outburst of incoming cosmic rays and gamma rays, that's shocking. Even though we may not feel it or know it on this level, our body feels it and experiences it. So needless 12, any tips on staying focused on progressing to our true path when everyone seems to want to go back to normal as things open up again? Yeah, first of all, what is normal? What we thought as normal was excruciatingly subnormal, and now we have an opportunity to actually become normal in the way we are intended to be. Normal meaning natural. What does it mean to be a natural human being, a divine human being, in touch with the flows of life, connected with the entire web of creation? That's what it means to be normal. And I see this as an opportunity to do so. So going back to the old caterpillar doesn't make any sense to me. If you're in the cocoon, which is what this whole COVIDian crisis is about, and every crisis is an opportunity, then we are here to break through the chrysalis and experience ourselves as human butterflies. So that again, if this is what our souls have chosen, we know it. If this is not something our souls have chosen, then we resist it, we fight it, and we collapse eventually. And I think the whole vaccine debate, which I'm not going to get into online, is maybe part of this. What's the dangers? We're talking about spike protein. We're talking about possible effects within our DNA that may not be so healthy. But if our souls are in charge, we know that there's a There's an evolutionary movement, and we are part of that. We are participating in that, and nothing can stop that. So celebrate these times. It's giving us the opportunity to take a break, to go inside, to remember who we are, and to create new pathways forward. Yeah, like Marianne says, I don't think we can go back to what we thought of as normal. Everyone seems to have shifted, whether it's to be in greater resistance with one another or more aware of the matrix. And it's like the great divide. The Bible talks about the separation of the wheat from the chaff. Maybe it's two different timelines, two different populations. One who is choosing on the soul level to move forward into the new earth, one who's choosing to remain behind and experience the dissolution of the old earth. And maybe both. And if we can simultaneously bridge that gap. Because there are bridges being made. There's also a bridge being made between this life that we experience as earthly life and the life that we experience after we leave this physical body in the passage we call death, or the world before we come into birth is the same. It's a slightly different vibrational frequency, and our essential being, our soul, just simply crosses back and forth through the veils. So my sense of me doesn't change when I'm on that side of the veil. It's just that my body is different and my senses are different. The senses that I'm functioning with are attuned to the vibration frequency of this other world. It's not any less real. It's less dense in its physicality, but it's not less real. So that's why many people, after they so-called die, don't even know that they're dead. It's simply because they've crossed over from physical existence, physical senses, in the way we define it, to a more subtle vibrational frequency that they're observing through the etheric or astral body. So that veil is also getting thinner. So that means that our ability to bridge from this world to the next world, or that world to this world, doesn't have to be so traumatic. For many people, the fear of death is so strong simply because it represents the great unknown, and it feels like the end of everything. It's not. It's anything but. So once we learn to bridge that gap and go back and forth a few times, we lose that fear and we actually experience this amazing vitality and creativity and joy about being here. Oh yes, we have. Okay, there's a question from Francesca. Is there any news about the magic box at Uluru as we approach the next solstice? I don't know. If you know, or if anybody knows, please let me know. And this reminds me also, the solstice is coming up in less than a couple days. So we could do a solstice meditation if people want, and maybe this could be a part of the meditation to reconnect with the magic box, which was opened in Uluru at the winter solstice last year. So anyone can tell me the specific exact time of the solstice? Yeah, if you know it, just say something in the chat, and either way, I'll plan to do a meditation around that time, so please join me if you wish. Yeah, Gloria says, thank you for explaining it. We aren't just meant to go back to the normal state because we're something different, because normal was not natural. All right, so let's take a few minutes just to be in presence. And, we're not going to do anything. I'm not going to do a guided practice. Just be in the silence, be with the breath, and just be. So let's do it together. Okay, so Francesca says solstice is at 3:32 UTC on Monday, June 21st. So that means in Europe it would be 4:32 a.m., right? And here in India it would be 8 a.m. All right, so let's do that. So let's start at 3:30 UTC, which should be 4:30 Central European time, and just translate that to Australian or Turkish or American or Canadian time zones, wherever you are in this world. And we'll do it. We'll do something. Sushina says, it seems to me that everyone is called upon to make use of their own abilities, resources, skills, knowledge, and so also to discover the level of new ones, or to use forgotten ones, to use more the neglected ones, and other skills and knowledge, to learn them on the run as needed. The ancient masterful invitation counsel, know thyself, echoes around the world. It's time for diligence, industriousness, courage, an exchange of knowledge, of mutual support, like here. Thanks to all. Thank you, Sushina. Beautifully said. Imogen says, thank you everyone. Let's enjoy who we are. Aho. Let's be in presence with what we are. All right then, so today is the 19th, so 21st, so that's a couple days, actually somewhat less. So 4:30 we'll begin European time. And I'll see what I can discover about the magic box, any updates on that. And if any of you know of anything, let me know, just email me. All right, friends, blessings, much love. Aloha, namaste. Bye.